Almighty and ever-living God, the creator of all things in heaven and earth, and the source of every blessing, we give you thanks for the wonders of your creation, for all the beauty that surrounds us, for the gift of life, and for granting us the opportunity to share in the same. And we especially give you thanks for our land, Barbados, for its leadership throughout the years. And we pray that as we gather this evening to deliberate on a constitution that will guide our country into the 21st century, we pray for civility. We pray that the ideas that come to the fore may be such that they for the betterment of our people. And we pray that all that transpires here may be a reflection of your honor and glory. For Christ's sake, amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have much pleasure in welcoming all those here and abroad who are participating in this town hall meeting. My sincere thanks to the media for promoting this event and for being present this evening. The commissioners present on the panel for this evening's discussion are Commissioner Adriel Brafitt, Commissioner Sullivan Balbulia, and I expect to be joined shortly by the Deputy Chairman, Senator Gregory Nichols. The invocation was led by Commissioner Senator the Reverend Dr. John Rogers. Other members of the Commission who are present and in the audience are Commissioner Christopher DeCaries, Commissioner Carrie-Ann Eiffel, Commissioner Sade Jimot, Commissioner Kahil Kathiwalda, and Commissioner Mary Redmond. The Secretary to the Commission, Professor Cynthia Barra-Giles, is also present. I also acknowledge the indefatigable Executive Officer to the Commission, Ms. Gail Atkins. Ladies and gentlemen, the 1966 Independence Constitution was amended in October last year to create the Republic of Barbados by establishing the office of President as the head of state of Barbados, and as stated in the amended act, to provide for related matters. It was recognized that more needed to be done to transition the country from its previous form of government to that appropriate for a parliamentary republic. And as a consequence, this commission has been established to consult with the citizens and residents of Barbados on what they will wish to see in the Constitution of the Republic of Barbados. As the advertisement promoting these series of town hall meetings have said, this is the opportunity to have your say on whatever topic you may wish to raise, provided it is not libelous or abusive. Try to limit your contributions to about 3 to 5 minutes so that others may be able to participate. Again, a warm welcome, and may I say I'm looking forward to a lively and a stimulating evening over the next few hours as we are obliged to conclude by 8 p.m. Welcome once again. The floor is open for any contribution. Yes, Representative. Yes. And for the record, please state your name.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Maxi Baldio. I represent no one but myself. I do have a couple of questions before I get to my minor submission. Right. I have some concerns as it relates to the Constitution or the construction of the panel. This is not personal. I know that everyone is honorable and distinguished in their area, but I am minorly questioning why you are on the panel, because on my end, it would appear to me that most of you, as listed, have a personal vested interest in a particular area, and that your submission ought best to be on this side of the aisle, and on that side of the aisle should be legal representation to make legal determination and provide legal guidance. Right? So that's one. Two, there is no public information on the composition of the panel, so that the public can know what you believe, what you represent. We all know that you are established in your particular field and that you have recognition in that field. But the public there should be a website that we can go to that says, this is so-and-so, this is it, or her bio, this is what they stand for on these various issues. LGBT rights, human rights, police reform, legal reform, whatever the area that they want to make clear, so that the public is informed as to what exactly constitutes the commission. Because based on the little bit that I can see, you guys determine the future of this country for the next umpteen years. And this is the one chance that the public gets. This process, not this today, this process is the one chance that the public gets to influence that for the future, and not based it on stuff that is 20 and 30 years old thinking. So, those are my initial observations. I'm also concerned about the process when you have collected your information. It is not clear to me how that process goes in terms of, it says that you are right to report and make a submission. Fine. Do the public get to see that report and object or comment or ask for clarification or changes before it becomes codified and before it goes to whoever determines the legalistic side of it? How does that process work? Are we left out of that, or are we included in that, meaning we the people? So I'm going to come to my main point, or my main small submission as it relates to the request for inclusion in the constitutional reform. And it highlights the point that I had to bite my tongue so hard to start off this event with. Let me state that the Constitution, as it currently is constructed, gives everybody the right of religion. The right of religion, which I totally support, should be the right of every citizen of this country. What is not included in the Constitution and must, and I state this word very clearly, must be included in the new Constitution, is the right of freedom from religion. Right? And I find it totally disheartening that you start this event with a Christian religious invocation. When you have a Muslim there, you can have a Jew, you can have why do we have to have, this is a secular society, and this should be a secular event, and it should not start with any religious invocation. That is what I require in the Constitution, that's all. Freedom from religion must be explicitly stated within the Constitution. So that when you go to you have a business and the business has a staff meeting, nobody should be able to get up and decide that they're going to start that secular business meeting with a religious prayer, and that if somebody does object, that they have the right to object, and that they can pursue that legally if necessary. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Let me first congratulate the Constitutional Reform Commission for giving us the opportunity to make our submissions. It is indeed very commendable. Only yesterday, I celebrated my 86th birthday, And thank you. And I think that I deem this the appropriate time that I should give a contribution. Mr. Chairman, sir, my name is Keith Adolphus Weeks from the civil parish of Barkers Road, Highgate Hall, St. Michael. As I crave your indulgence to make the following. 1, we as a Republican state should revisit certain signed treaties, especially pertaining to the death penalty, which prevent our honorable judges from carrying out. The penalty should not be taken off the statute books, whereas for the murder or persons who found guilty of murder, I think what we should be doing, if we do not want to loose the gallows, I would like to see introduce lethal injections, and for those who found guilty for manslaughter should receive public floggings. Second, sir, no one should be elected a minister of the crown unless he or she fails the polls. Third, the Prime Minister should only hold office for 3 4-year terms. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, taking into consideration that our president served this country and not individual parties, I think the president should be given the same time in office as a High Court judge and the Chief Justice. 4, elections should be held every 4 years with a date known ahead of time. 6, all persons of voting age should be eligible to offer themselves representative for the people. 7, there should be a special account committee outside of Parliament and headed by a master of the court. What made me come up with this idea, members of the committee? One would recall in 2018, a particular party received all 30 votes. And what happened? A member of the then government formed the opposition, which automatically qualified him to be the leader of the opposition. So therefore, he became the leader of the opposition and in charge of the account committee. But look what has happened. Almost 2.5 years after, an election was called, and the same thing happened on 30 seats, without having an opposition, that means there is no account committee. And I think so that there could be transformity, it is but time then that we look at this in detail and have an independent account committee headed by a master of the court. There, as I've said, there should be a special master of the court. Let's look at integrity. Whose it is? As long as the political laws allow for the purchase of all elected representatives, confusion will persist. Sir, no one is above the law. Let me reiterate. Sir, no one is above the law. And diplomatic and parliamentary immunity should not be granted for behavior which left much to be desired. Even from the floor of our honorable House of Parliament, where threats are made to each other, there should be redress to the court outside the Parliament. And the reason why asking for a redress outside of Parliament, it is no secret that the House of Assembly is the highest court of the land. So therefore, being covered with parliamentary immunity, which should be a thing of the past, let justice prevail, though the heavens may fall, there should be redress in the law courts in this country. And let's look at promotion. And let's look at promotion within the public service. Sir, it's my perception that promotion should be on service and seniority, but not supersession. I must say again, promotion should not be on supersession, but on seniority and service. I would also say, sir, let's look at acting appointments. Where acting appointments is concerned, sir, should not exceed 2 years. In the absence of integrity legislation, who guard the guards? In the absence of integrity legislation, who guard the guards? Mr. Chairman, because of politics, and I would like you to listen to this very carefully. Because of politics, Barbados' walking encyclopedia and luminary, the Honorable David Simmons, was denied an extension to carry out his duties as... Okay. I didn't get that. Okay, I'll wrap it now then. Okay. Okay then, I'll wrap it now. What I'd like, sir, to see then, I would go on that no more. What I'd like to see, we make a distinction by acting where the High Court judges is concerned. I think where the...
You can come back, you know. Okay? So don't... You can actually come back if you so desire. Okay? No, you can finish, but I'm saying that you can actually make a substantive contribution if you so desire.
Where acting is concerned, where the High Court judges are concerned, I think you should not say acting unless that judge was on vacation. But we have to look at the word temporary, because when you see an acting High Court judge like the Honorable Justice Carlyle Grave, the amount of work that he is doing, we have to look at it and make sure we address it, because I think that these persons with firearms are only getting a slap on the wrist, and we have to appreciate his recommendation. Thank you.
Before you speak, there were some issues raised by the first speaker to which we would like to make some response. The first one, in respect of the invocation, we take note of the view that questions in some respect why we start with a Christian invocation. I must share with you that when the commission has met, we have also on occasion used our brother Suleiman. And the intention is that really the invocation will be rotated and will not be a totally Christian invocation as the circumstances require. However, I note you had an overriding concern. You should be free not to be constrained to have any invocation of any type, Christian or otherwise. Is that a fair observation? Yeah, okay. Point noted, we take that on board. Mr. Weeks made a number of points, some of which will require some consideration before we give an answer. But the very last one you raised, I can speak to. Right now, Mr. Justice Graves is not acting Justice Graves. He's appointed on contract for a 3-year period, and therefore the reference to acting was dropped from the appellation appearing in the media. So that is his position. Mr. Justice Graves is on contract for the reason that he's already reached the statutory age for retirement as a substantive judge. But because of the yeoman services given, he's retained in the system on contract. Yeah. Before Commissioner Bradford speaks, I'd like to welcome the Deputy Chairman, Senator Gregory Nichols, who's just joined us.
Sorry, and with respect to your comment, sorry, I forgot your name. Right, with respect to your comment about the constitution of the commission, our views is not as important as the public's views. And our remit is that we take all of the feedback from the public, try to distill it and place it into a report, which will be a public report. I believe that there were 2 commissions similar to us before, which is the Courts Commission, that the report is available, and the Fords Commission, the report is available. Similarly, our report will be available. The report cannot obviously be made available to the public before we submit it to the president because, process-wise, that would be a bit untidy. But it would be a public report, and of course, you're free to comment on the report at any time once it's published. But just to reiterate, our role really is to take your views, everyone's views on board, and try to distill that and report to the government in terms of this is what Barbadians would like us to be like. Now, for example, when we began, when Father Rogers began, I noticed, that you were a bit uncomfortable, and the chap next to you sat down, etc. And I said, okay, fine, we made a mistake. That in fact, we need to respect everyone's views in terms of whether or not we need to start with a word of prayer. But as a commission, our word of prayer is not to the God that I serve, it's the God that we all serve if we serve a God or otherwise. So we respect that. Well, let me put it another way, in that our report is a report to the government in terms of this is what we believe that the public would like to see, but doesn't mean that the government must take everything that we report on board and say, okay, fine, we accept.
I understand that you make your report and the government will make the final decision. My question is, do we get to interact and object or support that report between the stage of your submission and the government saying this is what it is? Do we get to say it and then say this is not right, or yes, this is a good idea? What happens in between there? Because that is a gray area that I do not understand.
Well, all I can say is that you will get to see our report and comment on whether you accept or do not accept the report. But like us, you are free, obviously, to say to the government that we do not agree or we agree. But we're advisory. So our report does not mean that the government must accept what we're saying and implement it immediately.
I accept all that, sir. I'm clear on all of that. I am only trying to figure out if there's any involvement for the populace when the report is submitted before it comes out as this is the Constitution. Because the way I'm seeing it, you submit a report, the government will review it, and several months or years later, it will say, this is the Constitution. I'm asking what happens in between your submission and it becoming the Constitution. Where do we get to have an input in what has been submitted?
If I may, first of all, let me apologize for being late. I had a power outage from early this morning, and it was supposed to come back on anyhow.
And you're driving an electric car?
No, I'm not, unfortunately. I was too young to understand what went on in the Courts Commission time, but I am sure that after the submission of the Ford report, it was made public, and there was a lot of consultation and discussion on the various aspects of the report. In fact, I don't think that there were wholesale implementation of the recommendations in the Ford report. So there will be a normal conversation between government and the people as it relates to our report that we will submit.
Okay, thanks.
But I think what you should be clear about, what you should be clear about, when we have finished our deliberations, the report goes to the government.
I am clear on that, sir.
And then they decide what they want, when they will even release it.
I'm clear on that.
So as Commissioner Bradford pays, we are only, it's an advisory report.
I am clear on that, sir.
Good.
All I'm only asking about the what after.
Well, that will happen after.
Hey, good afternoon or good evening to everyone. My name is Devron Bruce. Even before I present to the commission, I have to acknowledge again the importance of what it does. and therefore process is necessary. We're living in a period where transparency is almost of utmost importance. And like my colleague Maxi, for instance, if, for instance, I presented a paper to the commission, I have no idea what the process of review is like. Do you have select areas of interest, for instance, that are more likely to be submitted in the final report than not? Is there going to be a majority vote on my submission, a majority vote on my submission? I think those are considerations you're going to have to think about so the public knows what is happening. It can't be a situation where you come and you say the committee has recommended or the committee has decided upon, but we don't know how. We don't know, who voted on what, for instance, who supported what, for instance. If it was a parliament, I would have known who supported something as opposed to it being behind closed doors. So transparency, I think, is extremely important in your process, and I think you have to, in essence, allow the public to know what you're doing to really instill the confidence that this is an actual organic and real activity as opposed to anything other. Now, no problem.
The commission has established a research team. In fact, later this week we will be interviewing some research assistants, and one of the things that we have decided is to ask the research assistants to help us track the submissions and put them into various categories in terms of what parts of the constitutions Barbadians are saying they want addressed in the reform of the constitution, so that we will carefully consider all of the submissions. We have decided amongst ourselves that the majority, we will have a basis we go forward on a majority. Hopefully we can build consensus, but where we can't, there will be an opportunity for persons who are in minority. In fact, in the Ford Commission report, if I'm not mistaken, there were minority submissions where the majority went in one direction, and that was cataloged in the report itself. So that we have agreed to commit to that process as well. So there's not a situation where our deliberations will be in secret. The report will be written in a way that the public can understand this is the bulk of the submissions, this is what we considered worthwhile, and this is what we did not consider that should be addressed. I think the chairman said publicly a couple days ago that there will be aspects of the structure of governance that might need reform, but might not necessarily need to come into the constitution itself, but where appropriate legislation to support certain structures in terms of advancing the democracy that we have, we will recommend those to government as well, where statutory amendments or new acts needs to come into place to put on a sure legislative footing the things that Barbadians want.
Well, I am glad to hear that, but I think it has to be appreciated and made public how the approach will be. Secondly, I think that's a very good segue that you made mention of the research agent, for instance. Again, given the importance of what you're doing, I think rigor is necessary. Now, I am sure every individual on the commission has an area of expertise and speciality in particular, but I don't believe that that is a rigorous enough process. So for instance, my area of expertise, I would say, is governance. I believe there are probably maybe 2 or 3 persons on the committee who may be able to see a review of what I have done, for instance, and have, I would say, a very informed opinion on it. But 3 persons, I don't think is rigorous enough to determine whether a submission should be accepted or declined, for instance. It may not be an issue of governance, it may be an issue of privacy, it may be an issue of human rights. So again, I think you may need to have layers to what you're doing. You may need to bring in maybe a focus group of experts, invite a focus group of experts that can specifically discuss these issues where knowledge gaps may exist within the commission. I think that's extremely important. It also eliminates biases, because if you have 2 individuals who are an expert in something, but they have a bias in one direction as opposed to another, I don't think that is a way that you should really take the commission. So you should have layers involved, I believe.
Another thing that, Devon, again, you're on point, is something that we have considered. Only yesterday, we had a meeting, myself and the secretary and the director general. The commission will be going through its own internal training. We've selected a number of people across various fields of professional expertise to come in and do internal training and discuss with us on a range of topics, so that we will also ourselves commit to going through a process where, because as we would appreciate that, Ron, the Constitution is not only a legal document, but it also has economic and political and social elements to it that undergirds what we call the society that we live in, so that we will commit to that process as well. If you say not 3 persons with a particular expertise, some people would say 5, some people would say 10, but then at some stage it becomes unwieldy. And in government, in its wisdom, has selected a cross-section of Barbadians to advise it as to what the public is saying. And I think that among the group that we have, that we can get it done.
I don't disagree, but again, it's not the commission I'm questioning. I'm just saying, does the commission have a layer where, in essence, you bring together, let's say, the 10 top individuals as it relates to governance, you sit them down when you have a discussion, but that was the point I was trying to get across. And I agree with my colleague again, Maxi, regarding coming back to the public. This has to be a democratic approach. So when you have those submissions and you make those decisions, I think you should at least come back to the public saying, this is the general direction that we're hoping to head in. You check the temperature, so to speak, and whether there are any objections or what have you, and you at least come back to the public, even if it is not change. I think democratically it makes sense to come back to the public again.
Just bear in mind that our report goes to the government, but before it becomes law, like any other piece of legislation, we have the ability to let the government know that we agree or disagree with what they're intended to do. So there will be opportunities for us. If you go on Parliament's website now, if you Google Parliament of Barbados now and stuff, you will see what laws they intend to debate next week. Because it's in draft, and you're able to comment, agree or disagree before it's implemented. And of course, you're also free, like all of us, to go to our parliamentary representative or otherwise and let them know, or do like what all of us do, not publicizing any particular organization, but get down to brass tacks and let our voice be heard.
I can take that point, but again, that is external to what the commission is doing. So I think structurally, again, you have to say it amongst yourself that we believe that we need to come back as a commission and let the public of Barbados know from in essence, what you have decided upon before your final submission. And organizational-wise, again, I guess this would be a tip to the commission, for instance. I think you may need to approach this not geographically, but on themes, for instance, because you may have circumstances where, again, my area of interest is governance. You may have circumstances where I come and make a submission, and it sounds great to everyone, but then you don't have that counter in a room. You don't have a space where individuals have a similar like mind. You have a situation where I come and talk about governance, Maxi talks about religion, somebody else talks about privacy, somebody else talks about health, and it does not create the environment that really lends to discussion. So I think you may want to approach it as a thematic approach, and in addition to locations.
Yeah. The intention is these sessions are open-ended. Thematic ones are coming. Thematic ones are coming, that is important. But for these first exercises, first 3, it's open session. So people, because we've not had them, and people have been saying, we need to come and say what we want to say, this is the purpose. And therefore, the thematic will come at another time, when you're free to come back and come as often as you wish to say, but I think you should give way at this point to someone else, if you
Yes,
don't mind.
certainly I will. And I would just end by saying again that it's a pleasure being here.
In the absence of someone coming up, I'll be very short. Oh, you were coming. Oh, I apologize, sir.
Good evening. Since Mr. Brathwaite made it public knowledge, I have no choice now but to confess that I am indeed Dayton Smith. A short while ago, we appointed a president. So there was some cost involved in the ceremonial aspect of it. There was some cost involved in the changing of names of institutions and all that goes with that. And after all the costs and after all the hullabaloo, what we have is a ceremonial president in place of a ceremonial governor general. When we had a ceremonial governor general, at least we could say that that person was there to represent the head of the state, which was the British monarch. Now we have a ceremonial president that I'm not sure who they're representing. And I would submit that not only has a lot of cost gone into it then, but there's a lot of cost going to go into maintaining that office. And I would submit that that office could serve a much better purpose to the society than to be simply ceremonial. I'm going to submit a paper to the commission which will say a lot of the ways in which a president can bring balance to a government in Barbados. But I will just give you an example or two of where I'm going with this at a high level. The Westminster system of government basically evolved from a monarchy. And therefore, it is not a great surprise that within our system of government, there are some things that are not far removed from a monarchy in terms of the fact that the Prime Minister, by being head of the ruling party, appoints almost everyone in government or has some influence over the appointment of all of the major posts in government. One of the things that has been a theme of government from the time I was old enough to vote, and in fact, from the time we became a democracy, there has always been a question over every government about their financial management. Whether it be incompetence, whether it be greed, whether it be whatever else. Every government that has been in place since we became democratic, there have been questions over the spending of the people's money. And we pretended to solve that problem by appointing a Public Accounts Committee. But just like everything else, the Public Accounts Committee is controlled by the government. In any audit, I'm a financial person, and the rules of audit basically insist from beginning to end that there must be independence of the auditor and the audit process. So the Public Accounts Committee, for instance, the law says that it should meet publicly and debate the public accounts. But we all know that never happens because a government does not want that debate to take place publicly and expose anything that they don't want to be seen. And all they have to do is simply not turn up to the meetings and they will not happen. And therefore, I think it's 2014, I think we never had a public debate on the Auditor General's report. Recently, we've had the first reply to it, I think, probably in all that time. What I would recommend is this. That is one of the functions that should be removed from the control of the government and put under the control of the Office of President. The Auditor General, in my view, should report to the Office of the President. And the appointment of the Public Accounts Committee should not be as it is now, where there's a majority of members of the government sitting on the committee, but instead the President should appoint 6 of those members from the Senate who should not be senators that were recommended by the government. And the Governor General should also, the President, thank you, should also, in cases where there is no leader of the opposition, appoint a 7th person. And then from those 7 people, appoint the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. Therefore, if the government officials on that committee choose not to attend, the meetings will go on. The public's money will be debated in public, and we will all see what has happened. I think, by the way, and I think we should all applaud the Auditor General, who's done a phenomenal job for years now. Every year I read that report, it's a phenomenal thing. He highlights everything that goes wrong in government. Most people don't know because they don't read the report, and then there's no public debate. But the general principle I'm trying to espouse is this. In the same way that the Governor General can bring balance to that process, there are a number of other processes in government. Like, for instance, the Judicial and Legal Services Commission. The majority of that, all of it, I think, is effectively appointed by the President. And most of the commissions that elect public officers are that way. So we have this appearance that it's not controlled by the Prime Minister, but in fact, through those commissions who are appointed by the Prime Minister, one could say that they have some allegiance to the Prime Minister or the government. And therefore, all of those commissions, there are ways to balance them out so that the appointments made on those commissions by the President, rather than all of them. And I'm not suggesting by any means that the President should make all of them, because then that would just tilt the balance entirely in a different direction. I'm simply saying that what you really should have is two arms of government, which is an executive presidential arm, which is the government. And then the third arm, of course, is the judiciary. And if the entire judiciary is appointed by the government, then really the judiciary seems, and justice must be seen to be done, seems to lean towards the government. Whereas if these things are appointed by two arms of government that are distinct, I think you get a much better balance to public appointments and to the management of public funds. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you. It's indeed a pleasure for me to be here. I've been waiting for such an opportunity from 1991. Oh, sorry. My name is Reverend Buddy Laria, and I wrote to the commission back in August, the date is August the 3rd, 2022. I have not.
Has been passed to my research assistant, whom I only got last week. Because you had to raise a query there that I wanted an answer to for myself. So you should have an answer within the week.
Okay, I do appreciate. So since I'm waiting for your response, is it possible though to share? Okay. Yes, my main concern was summarized in the letter in 3 points. First, for the committee to find appropriate words to ensure that Barbadians understand basically what the 1661 Slave Code was. In 1661, Barbados passed the Slave Code Act that said, summarized, that black people were not human beings. Most Barbadians do not know that this Slave Code Act was passed. And if it has been reprieved, we need to know that it has been. Because if it has not been reprieved, it is still active on the statutory books. It took America 117 years before they adopted the Slave Code Act and put in their constitution that black people were 3/5 human beings. And because of their constitution, all the countries of the world then endorsed the practice of treating black people as less than human beings. Now, it is very important for the committee to be established at this time. So I really and truly welcome the committee with all the work that you have to do. Because this is the 530th anniversary of the economic and spiritual essence that was taken from African people and given to European. You see, we as African people are spiritual, not religious, spiritual. So we are on a journey now to reclaim that spiritual and economic energy. And remember, Barbados, this is 395 years of Barbados as a colony. In the next 5 years, we will be celebrating the 400th anniversary of Barbados as a colony that established three very important parameters. One, a rich and a poor world, a black and a white world, and what we call a man's world, because there was no female on the island when Barbados landed. That's one. Secondly, the moral issue of voting. In 1955, His Excellency Barrow crossed the floor and established the Democratic Labour Party. 1955. 4 months later, we had Hurricane Janet that devastated Barbados and changed Barbados forever. And when he became Prime Minister and took us into independence, he justified crossing the floor by putting in the Constitution that no party should be represented in the Constitution. So Barbadians have been going to the polls from 1966. You hear, vote BLP, vote DLP, vote NDP. But when you go into the ballot paper, there's no BLP, no NDP, no DLP. Only the candidate and their profession. I stood at 3 general elections, 1994, 2018, and 2022. And I never voted for myself. I am a human rights activist, and I bring my concern to the person who are illiterate but don't have an independent vote. Because if they can't see their name, how they're going to recognize yours? That's the center of racism and classism in Barbados, of which, and I make this statement now, I am an expert in racism and black consciousness training that I specialized from England. And I'm making these points because I personally have a human rights case in England for 45 years. It's still there. That's another story. And the last point, sir, the third and final point is that there must be a commission or human rights commission in the Constitution. At the moment now, and I could show you the letters I have at least 20 people that are inmates in prison that are begging me to represent them because their human rights and their constitutional rights are violated. But I cannot do it on my own. If there was a Human Rights Commission in Barbados, I could pass over these 20 to the Human Rights Commission and let them do it. So I thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from you.
distinguished panel. I'm wearing a young man's trousers, but I'm 82 years old, and sometimes I can't believe it myself. But the chairman was at the same school that I attended. He was a bit younger than I was. My name is George Lincoln Reed Jr. For my sins, I retired from the public service after 33 years with the effective date of August 26, 1996. At that time, I was the Director of Finance and Economic Affairs. So I had the good fortune of attempting to assist the government of the day to handle the problems of economic adjustment during the period 1991 and beyond. I did not intend to say anything this evening. I planned to listen, but when we had that little phase in which certain people began to question the process in which we are engaged, I found myself with a certain degree of sympathy. Because if one wished to be nihilistic, we could question the whole process in which we are currently engaged. How do we know that what is eventually put forward represents concerns and thinkings of the broad mass of ordinary Barbadians? How do you know that our present electoral system is fit for purpose, to use the current jargon? But those are issues which I'm sure will not be resolved, however we try to cut our cake. I got up to ask a question, and the question is this: does the present commission have access to all the various submissions and presentations which were made by at least the persons who were involved in the process of the Cox Commission and the Sir Henry Ford Commission? So I would like an answer to that first before I go on.
I think the short answer is no. And primarily because I don't think we've asked for them. We've only had the Ford report, and there are references in the Ford report to a number of things. But at this point, we have not had any requests or have gone into those reports or the underlying submissions.
Okay, I asked that question because sometime in 1997, when I was the alternate executive director at the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, D.C., that was my second stint, I met Sir Henry, who I had known from, well, longer than either of us would want to remember. And he asked me whether I would like to make a submission because he thought that I had had an interesting experience. So I took the time to do so, and a few months ago I came across a copy of that submission. It is dated the 31st of March, 1997. If the commission is interested, I can have a copy made and I can present it. It dealt with, sorry.
Please do. Because it was quite a labor to even get hold of a copy of the Ford Commission's report. And certainly the accompanying documents we do not have. So if you have a document to share with us, we'd be very grateful.
It looks as if I can make some money by offering my library, offering access to my library to special persons. And it's very large. Incidentally, I destroyed half a container of books which I offered to the university, which they found reasons not to accept, and then they sort of languished in my garage. After I had a case of leptospirosis and spent 4 days at QEH, which was interesting, Murray said that they have to go, anything which can harbor rats have to be burnt. So they ended up at Port Vale sugar factory and added energy to the sugar producing process. I felt sad about it, not because I had spent money to bring them down from Washington, but because I think that they might have been useful to some researchers. But the point, though, I want to make in brief is that I tried to commit to the record my experiences as one of the managers of the adjustment process between 1991 and 96. Sadly, the institutional memory of this country, to which I may claim a part, has lost a lot of that input. And I think, throughout a suggestion that before any permanent secretary is allowed to retire in future, he ought to be debriefed and produce at least 2 or 3 pages summarizing what he's learned over the period in the public service and seeking his views about what could be done to make the public service of Barbados a bit better than it is at the moment. But just to wind up, because I think that if I'm going to say anything, I will have to say it in writing, and I hope it will be substantively considered. The point is this. The commission met in many places. I digitally submitted my bid. About 10 years later, I attended a function organized by the Barbados Public Workers Cooperative Credit Union, of which I was the originating president. And I met Sir Henry Ford, who was on some other business at Hilton, and he said, George, this is the first time I can tell you, we liked your submission very much, but we never got time to deal with it because our focus was on the political issues of constitutional change and not the economic issues which you highlighted, nor the concerns about how the public service could be improved to make it more effective for Barbados. And now, looks like going close to 26 years after my submission, I think much of what I said then is still very relevant to Barbados. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
And George, and it's probably timely for us to remind all of you that you can submit your thinking or your thoughts or writing to us. Our email address is constitutionalreform@barbados.gov.bb, right? constitutionalreform@barbados.gov.bb. So even after you've made your oral presentation, you're free, as I ran out just now, when Mr. Lowry was presenting to say to Mr. Smith, please send us, in writing your thoughts, if you so desire. So just repeat, constitutional reform at barbados.gov.bb.
Good night. My name is Curtly Gibson. I believe in God, and I would like that statement to remain in the Constitution. If this is a Christian nation still, then I have no problem with God being mentioned in the Constitution, and that we standing for principles along the line of God. I would like to remove from the Constitution any statement that would negate the rights of people under the guise of a national health pandemic, such as wearing masks, and so that we won't have to do things that, for instance, on a national health pandemic, but just mentioning that statement, our rights were taken away through the COVID-19 situation. I would like that cannot happen under the new Constitution. If the government was to make a statement that there's a national health pandemic, I would prefer that they could make suggestions, like standing in the house or wearing masks, but cannot command that you stand in your house or that you wear a mask, right? Or that I stop from moving, when these are supposed to be my freedoms and my liberties under the Constitution. So that's my thing. Just on the national health, if there's any, because all that we do here now, the best laws we can write and be admired in all societies, but then can be taken away if the government just says there's a national health emergency. And where in truth and in fact, there's no evidence, or might not be any evidence to the general public that there's a national health emergency. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. My contributions this evening will be a bit radical and different from, I think, anything else we're going to hear this evening. But I believe that if we take the Sustainable Development Goals seriously, especially in relation to the environment, I think that it would be very fitting for us to add a provision in the Constitution which would guarantee protection, or which would give a protection and guarantee for active transportation and for safe, reliable, and consistent and affordable public transportation island-wide, Sunday to Sunday, and for sustainable transportation options more broadly. Over the last 20 years, we've seen a double in the number of cars. And as a consequence of that, we've seen the development of car-centric modes of, car-centric types of developments occurring. And we have seen a deterioration in the public transportation. Recognizing the negative environmental, social, and health problems associated with car-centric transportation, and in recognition of what has been stated in the Physical Development Plan, Section 1.35, where it identifies the importance of moving from car-centric transportation to multimodal mobility. I don't know how many of you in here, I don't know how many of you in here use alternative modes of transportation as your primary method. How many of you do? Anything besides a car to get around. How many of you? You see, that's the problem. That's the problem. You develop an infrastructure that's car-centric, and then you have things like this happening. And then people who don't can't afford a car, don't want to, don't have any alternatives. They're stuck in their houses and they can't get anything done, or they have to wait 3 and 4 hours for a bus to come. Or they have to, you know. Also, when you have car-centric modes of transportation, it encourages people to do things which are illegal and immoral. For example, driving without a license and driving without insurance. I don't think the average Barbadian understands how bad that is from a moral standpoint, because I don't think they understand if you do not have, most Barbadians do not have adequate liquid assets to contribute to compensate someone that they injure on the roadway. And if they don't have those financial resources, the persons they injure or kill cannot be compensated. And so if you have a car-centric modes of transport, someone who wants to get from position A or position B, when they see how bad the public transportation system is, especially on Sundays and at peak hours, when they see how unsafe it is for pedestrians to walk, when they see how unsafe it is for cyclists to go on the road, what other options do they have? And many people do not consider having insurance or a license to be an important requirement to driving. And when you don't have that and you get into an accident or injure someone, you can't compensate them. So I think it needs to be solidified that that is something that is not acceptable, and we need to promote alternatives so that that does not happen. Secondly, for the youth, if you have car-centric infrastructure, that means the youth are reliant on cars to get around. And if you don't have a parent that can give you a car, or you don't have the resources to get a car, it means you're stuck using that can significantly curtail your mobility. And thirdly, elderly people who don't have the financial resources to get a car or to maintain it are stuck in their homes. People who may not be elderly or may not be young, but they don't have money, 2 minutes, to afford to purchase a car. They don't have any options. Car-centric modes of transport encourage traffic congestion. They encourage high air pollution. They encourage high CO2 emissions. And there are various studies that have been conducted by the World Health Organization which highlight the negative health impacts that air pollution and CO2 emissions can have on society, such as neurological illnesses. It can stifle neurological development in children. It can cause respiratory issues such as asthma, and it can cause later respiratory issues later in life. So I think if we take the sustainable development seriously, we have to provide strong protections and provisions within our Constitution for active transport. That includes walking, that includes cycling, and that includes public transportation. And there needs to be strong legal measures to make sure that these rights are not infringed. If you take the Sustainable Development Goals seriously, that is something you have to do. This is not a joke.
Thank you very much. You don't have your name. You have your name.
Jabari Jones.
Jabari.
Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Yes.
Yeah, just three things quickly. One, when you make your submission, can you include language to make the Constitution a living document so that it can be changed in the future and not be seen as locked in? Not all. All right. The second thing is, I think you guys can probably do a better outreach via social media and the website in terms of getting more public buy-in into what you are trying to achieve, which I support. So I think maybe in your team, you may need to have a webmaster and social media person, because you should be able to make, apart from emailing it, you should be able to just go to your website and drop in your yeah? All right.
We do accept that, Maxie, and we are having that rolled out. We're going to have a website, social media presence, and persons are going to be manning that. So we're having we're going to interact with the public in various forms.
Okay,
Town
great.
halls is one of them. The thematic areas of the town halls will come out in the next month or so. And then we're going to have on social media a presence on Twitter, on Facebook, on IG, and we're going to be interacting at various levels. So yes, that's the plan.
All right, great. My last thing is to ask whether it is practical and feasible to have a printed copy of the Constitution on hand for all persons who are arriving who may not be familiar with the existing Constitution.
That is being printed as we speak, and we hope by the next town hall there'll be copies to take away for those who come to that event.
Thank you. That's
And it will also be online on the website.
great.
We also want to recognize that persons may want to submit in various forms, written, oral, perhaps a video, we don't know, but we're going to have the various mechanisms by which persons will want to submit. We recognize that persons with disabilities may also want to submit in various forms and fashions. We're also going to allow for that to happen. So we're working on all these streams where persons can submit, but we are encouraging all Barbadians to submit their views, their ideas, their suggestions, and from everyone. It doesn't have, you don't have to be a particular type of person or whatever. Anyone can submit and should submit. It's a worthwhile exercise. And as a commission, we will be looking at every submission. We will review it. We can't say that it will enter into the final document, but we will review as we go forward. There will be a hotline that will be set up. Is it set up already? For persons to call in, because some persons might not just want to write, they might just want to call in and have a question or so on. That will also be rolled out.
Hi, good night. My name is Lou, L-U-I. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be here from the beginning, so I'm a bit lost on all the stuff. So can you just, we are here to give our suggestions on what we would like to see in the Constitution, is that correct? Yeah. Okay, all right. So for me, personally, I don't know how much people know about our Prime Minister indicated that she wanted to develop a film industry here. As someone who wanted develop a film industry here, as someone who from the age of 13 wanted to be a filmmaker, I always thought that I had to leave the island to do that. But after hearing that, it gave me the vision of actually being able to do that on this island, which I love. This is my home, there's nowhere else to call home. This is where my blood, sweat, and tears is. So after that, I had, with all my knowledge, I started developing ideas on how we can do that, and I believe I have the solution, and that's to make a film culture. There's a lot behind that, but in terms of related to the Constitution, I believe we should have a right of self-expression, being able to express ourselves, because I find that going back to the time of slavery, the idea was to control people and be like a monolith. So, for example, the slaves, they used to have the hair cut and stuff, so you can't differentiate easy to. We all a monolith, once you be able to listen well. So, and I find that in our culture, we are still quote unquote holding that ideal of we have to look a certain way, everybody like certain dress codes and stuff like that. No, I'm not saying dress codes is bad. I just feel that the dress codes we have implemented in Barbados is very restrictive and not allow people to express their self-identity. And as someone looking to build a film culture and build a film industry here, something that is reliant on that is the ability to express itself how we feel. For example, the most popular Bajan, Rihanna, she is very famous, but one thing that people love about her is her culture, her way of living, and that is what we have here in Barbados. And I believe that Rihanna isn't just something that was one in a million. I believe we in Barbados have the talent to be able to be great players on the world stage, and I just believe that having a right to express itself and everybody to find itself and be able to express it through identity, we will be able to achieve that. So my suggestion is we have a right of self-expression in this country. All right.
One other medium that we are utilizing is the U Report WhatsApp mechanism. So you can go to U Report WhatsApp. The number is 8326775. You can WhatsApp Reform to 8326775, and a series of questions will come up, and you can get some of your questions answered there as well. So that's on WhatsApp on the U Report.
Good night, everybody. I'm Cyprien Latouche. How can I start? I like these town hall meetings to start. And I like some of the things which I've heard so far. And what I see coming across is the concerns, particularly of transparency and of the assurances that we don't have, that the suggestions that are made are taken on board holistically. Well, forget the holistic part first, but that are taken on board, and that what then is the end result is truly what Barbadians want. But one of the challenges that has to happen with that is that Barbadians need to have the education first as to what actually is a constitution and what a constitution should be. And I think that education is missing to a very large degree from this exercise so much as it has started. Like, it's very good to say about, okay, well, we have a commission, everybody has his expertise in certain things, and we are going to listen to the feedback of the people. But at the same time, that feedback, it has to be more dynamic and interactive. So therefore, when it's not just a matter of me getting up, saying something, and then y'all listening, and then going back and then say, okay, well, all the Barbadians said this, so therefore, whatever. I think there has to be another layer, which again, some of the people alluded to, which is that maybe between the process of the actual finalization of the report, which you all are doing, and then it's even presentation to the president, there has to be a part to me where there is I don't want to say a debate, where the people then are invited to say, okay, let's sit down and talk about this here. And then ensure that the Constitution is just not a collection of ideas, but works together to represent a real vision for the 21st century that takes Barbados forward, right? There's a difference between institutional change and constitutional change. And again, I don't think a lot of people really and truly understand the distinct difference between the two. They don't really make the distinction between the two. That's clear. And that is, again, a requirement that you're all not going to have to try to, or should, in my opinion, try to further educate people on. So therefore, we can separate those various conversations. Like, I think the contribution that was made by the elderly gentleman who had vast experience in the public service and speaking with respect to the financial differences and the economic differences. And then also the other contribution that was made based on how by an earlier gentleman who was talking about the separation of the accounting aspects and the government then being able to be held to account. I think that is one of the most vital things as well. One of the big problems we have in Barbados, and I keep on harping on all the time, we have actually a government and in particular Prime Minister that actually has more power than most Prime Ministers in the world. She has more power for sure than the one that's in England right now. Because our Prime Minister is capable of, let me rephrase that. Our administration is capable of ignoring what the actual Constitution requires and does as it sees fit without, not maybe even if you aren't violating the technical wording of a constitution, for sure you're not honoring the spirit of it. And that is the problems we have, let's say, with not having the Public Accounts Committee being able to meet, because the government has so much power and ability to simply ignore the spirit that's required of a democracy, which is that there is a conversation with people. So therefore, one of the things that have to be written within the Constitution, which I find lacking, is that there are no real penalties for when a government behaves badly or when an individual does not honor and live up to what the spirit of the Constitution and what it means. And that has been maintained deliberately by administration after administration in order to facilitate their continued within power. So within the new Constitution, as is discussed and drafted, there has got to be a new consideration of how we can hold people who operate within the Constitution, who are supposed to uphold the Constitution, to account. I've said that this, I'll put on record here now. I've said that when we rewrote this Constitution, they made a big mistake. And instead of admitting and owning up to that mistake and fixing that mistake, we have continued with it. And that is the fact that you just went into the Constitution and replaced the Governor General, where spoke about the Governor General with speaking about the President. And the intention, in my opinion, was that the President is supposed to replace the Queen, but the Governor General is the Queen's representative. She is not the Queen. So therefore, it meant then that the functions that can be assigned to the Governor General under the old Constitution now technically have to be fallen on the President. So therefore, that is why the President was technically able to appoint 2 opposition senators, because that is one of the roles and functions of that role of Governor General. But really and truly, again, the spirit of the Constitution and the spirit of democracy is that it says within the Constitution, there shall be a leader of the opposition. There shall be. Not there may be, there could be, there ought to be, or in case if there is not, this is what you do. It says there shall be. And, pardon me?
Sir, that is not correct. The Constitution does speak to a situation where there is a vacancy in the office of the appointment. Of the, let me just correct you, sir. The Constitution does make provision for when there is no leader of the opposition.
Excuse me, can I now speak?
There shall be.
Thank you. There shall be a leader of the opposition.
Chair, I'm not, no, I don't want to, just let me permit me to respond. You are making a point that the Constitution says there shall be a leader of the opposition.
Yes.
All right, but I'm also indicating to you that there are other provisions of the Constitution that speak to when there is no leader of the opposition, what should obtain. So that when the president appointed two independent senators, when there was no leader of the opposition, she was exercising a power that was set out in the Constitution, which spoke to what happens and obtains when there is no leader of the opposition. So I'm just saying you're not correct in that statement.
Mr. Nichols, I am very correct in what I said. Because you didn't listen to what I said. And you didn't let me finish also what I said. Okay? Because I said first, there shall be a leader of the opposition. That's what I said. There's no incorrect thing about that. In just a second, in the first instance, the person shall be chosen from the people who do not support the prime minister. Okay? In terms of the election of the prime minister. In the second instance, it shall be chosen from the persons who support the prime minister but are willing to go across the floor. In the third instance, if there is no person that is going to do that, the Governor General then assumes those responsibilities. Okay? So that does not stop there from there shall be a leader of the opposition. That means that the Governor General functions as the leader of the opposition. So therefore, in that capacity, they have the ability to do the things that the leader of the opposition is assigned to do within the Constitution. So when I hear that there, right, that, it says that it doesn't have to be a leader of the opposition. No, that is not what the Constitution says. So therefore, when people start to want to reinterpret what the word shall within the Constitution means, I get upset. Because again, as I said, it is a matter that understanding the process of democracy and what democracy is about. And the reason the government is made up of a proposition and an opposition. It is made up of two parts. One, not a political opposition, because the Constitution does not recognize political party. It recognizes the process of democracy and debate, which means that there have to be two sides to any debate. One side in which you argue the pros, and the other side in which you argue the cons. The opposition in that respect is who argues the cons. So therefore, that is the process of the democracy. And that is what I'm talking about, understanding that whole thing and not, in my opinion, ignoring the spirit of a democracy and the spirit of what the Constitution is supposed to say. Okay, so please, let me cool down on that there. There has to be structured within any new constitution an ability, as I said, to punish individuals for not abiding by the spirit of that constitution. So therefore, if we know that the reasons why we are supposed to have a public accounts committee, which is in order to maintain the finances and to give a public account of the finances of a government, then there have to be structures within that constitution that allow for that to happen, which is what the gentleman earlier was talking about. Yes? But,
2 minutes to wrap up.
I'm sorry, my apologies. Okay, so at some point in time, I would like there to be, I've heard you said you're on Instagram and all the different medias and those sort of things. One of the things which I would like to suggest is that we also have a conversation which is like a debate kind of format, where we can present, where you all, as members of the panel, can present an idea of a draft constitution, even if it's not something that say that is finalized, that isn't close to going to a president, but something that can be, people can look at and talk about and say, oh, well, this makes sense, this is nice, this understand. We understand this philosophy, and is a whole cohesive document. And one of the other things which I want to quickly add is that when you look across the world and look at all other constitutions, in many different instances, you will see that there's a certain regularity within which certain constitutions are changed. For example, the German constitution is changed many, many times, in terms of like 6 or 7 times sometimes is amended in order to keep up with the current times and the conditions. And one of the things which we have to reflect in this new one is the willingness for us to do that as well. And also not for the people just to feel that, oh, we only have one opportunity every God knows how many years to make a contribution to a living document that's supposed to belong to us, and not then for it to be ignored like the 4 document recommendations, the 4 document were, or what have you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
I just want to make something very clear here from where I sit, which is as follows. We have divided the commission into separate committees to address some issues. For example, the committee which I'm part of has a responsibility in terms of stakeholder outreach, in terms of these types of engagement that we're having. And every submission to us is read, reviewed, and we promise you not only to acknowledge your submissions, but where we need clarification or any additional information, we will reach out to you. It does not matter how long your submission is, it doesn't matter what area you submit, we promise you that we will review them. In fact, I've done more reading within the last couple of weeks than when I was at university for that very reason. If I use young Mr. Weeks, is it? Submission about transportation, right? I understand his submission, if I can sum it up, is that maybe we should have, as of right, public transportation. So it does not matter the nature of your submissions. I promise all of you here tonight and all of Barbados that as a commission that we take all of your submissions seriously. We will review them. We cannot promise you that every submission that you make that we will on forward to the relevant authorities, because we're not able to do that. But we will treat each submission with the same seriousness regardless of who it comes from. And that's why we're here. We're here because we want to hear from you, the public. We want to hear from every individual in Barbados. So I just thought I would make that very clear. Thanks.
Support my brother, Commissioner, in saying that in that respect, just don't send submissions, but where you can, offer solutions. It's very easy to say I am submitting, but come up with solutions. And if these solutions have a component that you think that there need to be a sanction to implement it, then so do. Because it is not just for us. Not just for us to come up with these solutions themselves. So this is an exercise that I hope to invite all of you to. And anything you've said here this evening, feel free to confirm it in writing to the Commission. We expect that, not just vent it here, but reduce it in writing. Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay. Kurt Gibson again. The first time, like 2 elections ago, a lady was running for government, her standard might not have been that high, but she was denied a bank account. I think it should be written in the Constitution that no citizen of Barbados should be denied a bank account. It's as simple as that. So she said that she could not get the funding to carry on the campaign because people wanted to pay with checks. And she couldn't get a bank account, therefore she could not run. So if that could be added into the Constitution, I would really appreciate that. Yeah, she couldn't get a bank account open. For whatever reason, it was at First Caribbean Bank. I do not know the details, but she could not get the bank account open.
Good evening. My name is Roger Worrell. My concern is that there's a concept in the Constitution called, I think it's called the State Action Doctrine, which limits constitutional rights only to state action or parastatal institutions. And therefore, an individual whose rights have been infringed can only sue the state and not a private entity. I think that that should change, and that constitutional rights should not be limited only to state institutions or parastatal institutions, but to private entities as well. And that is my suggestion. Because what it does is limits the rights of individuals, and they may have to pursue non-constitutional matters to protect their individual rights.
Could you give us an example of the kind of rights you think that we can expand from the Bill of Rights section?
I'm not so much thinking about expanding the rights as exist, but I'm looking at expanding the ability of the individual to sue. Let's say, for example, a school infringed my rights. Let's say as an individual, a parastatal institution or school or college, I can sue that institution because it represents the state.
Yeah.
But if, let's say, a private entity, I don't want to call it private entities, but a private entity did something that is in breach of my rights, there is no constitutional action that I would have available.
You still have recourse to legal action?
Yes, but that legal action may not carry the same importance as pursuing constitutional. In other words, when one sues, like for example, the United States, that principle does not apply, and that individuals can sue for breaches of their constitutional rights against non-state entities, I think.
I'm not following that but then the United States is a little more complex because they have a federal government and then they have a states, right? So within that context, that might be a little different. But I'm interested in your point because there is a theory in constitutional law that we can expand it. But I know, for example, in the Guyana Constitution, there are a number of things that have been articulated as rights. But there are broad statements of how the society is organized. Right?
I'm not looking at expanding rights because, for example, there's some people who believe that people should have the right to housing and people should have the constitutional right to those things. But those things would be difficult to enforce because what would be considered housing? What type of housing? Those sort of things. I'm not looking at that. I'm just saying that maybe individuals who suffer harm from a private entity should be able to use the constitutional power to sue rather than just taking action on an individual basis.
Right of bringing an action against a fellow citizen for any infringement.
But does that carry the same weight?
But so it gives you an effective remedy.
But
in other words, if somebody appropriates your property and goes onto your land or so forth, I don't think in practical terms the person who was aggrieved by somebody coming and putting something on their land, they want it off. Whether or not the defendant is the state or the person who put the encroachment on the land, doesn't matter to the person who's affected, but the courts still operate. And I'm very interested in what you're saying. That's why I asked.
To be quite honest, I didn't think about it very carefully before.
Let's help you. Let's help you because I want to have the conversation with you, right? And I think it's something that we have flagged as an issue that we want to discuss because there's a third and fourth generation rights that other countries in the world that have reformed their constitutions have incorporated into the process, and we are looking at that as well. So I'm very interested in it because, for example, we might want to strengthen the right to be free from discrimination. And there might be large entities, institutions, businesses, or what's not, that might exert power and influence on people who are disenfranchised. And in that way, you might want to stamp out discrimination against people by strengthening their ability to challenge discriminatory action. Right? Let me just finish, right? Because I said we want to have a conversation with you as well. So that I'm interested in the details of it. But at the same time, the courts, from the Privy Council right down to the CCJ, have consistently held that where there is an alternative remedy in the courts will not grant constitutional relief. This is something that perhaps we might want to discuss. For example, if the police were to arrest you wrongfully and you were beaten in custody or so forth, you might want to bring an action against the state for assault and battery, as opposed to infringement of your right to freedom and unlawful search and seizure, right? And there is a line of authorities which the Privy Council has set out, basically saying that if you have an alternative remedy, you should only exercise the constitutional relief in the most severest of cases. So that I'm interested into whether or not going forward, we need to set the barriers so high as to approach the court for constitutional relief when there is an action by the part, as you say, state or actors acting for, let's say the government's developing a road or a highway and it gives the contract to some international, Chinese or something like that, and it prevents a community from being able to access a well or water or something like that, but they are in possession of the land for the development and what's not. Do you go after the company, do you go after the state, or do you incorporate both? And those are some issues that we have to work out going forward as to making relief for infringement of your rights more readily available to people. So that's why I asked for examples.
That is the line I was going down, and you use the example of discrimination. But how many people bring discrimination suits against private entities? I think that provision, in my opinion, I'm not a lawyer, but that provision, I think, protects private interests, or seeks to protect private interests.
But in fact, the remedy is available.
My opinion is that constitutional remedies carry more weight than private remedies.
I'll tell you, the damages you get for non-constitutional matters are greater than what you get under the Constitution.
Well, maybe that's the problem. But that's the end of my submission. Thank you.
As to whether the diaspora will be part of these meetings on Facebook, and the answer is yes, in terms of the consultations that we're seeking to be engaged in. Are there any other interventions this evening? Yes, Mr.
Thank you, Chair. Now you mentioned the diaspora. It triggered a concern that I have. In 2018, the Prime Minister of England, Theresa May, apologized to the heads of Commonwealth countries for the violation of the human rights of Commonwealth citizens, black people in particular, 1950s to the 1970s. I'm just saying, this is what I'm getting at. And they have set up, the government has set up, a compensation scheme. But there are hundreds, if not thousands, of Barbadians that are eligible, but the government have not informed the people of Barbados. How do
Which government?
the government of Barbados have not informed the people of Barbados whose human rights were violated in the 1950s and 70s, that there is compensation, or they are eligible for compensation. I'm trying to get the diaspora, the Caribbean, CARICOM, to assist in getting the people.
This is the British government set up a compensation fund.
Yes, it's called Windrush Compensation Scheme.
And you say that that is a matter that's been communicated to the government of Barbados?
Yes.
Well, speaking for myself, I'm not aware of it. It's something that I will undertake to look into. And if it's something that we can do, we will make appropriate
I
recommendations.
appreciate you do that and let the government know they have a duty. Not only Barbados government, the CARICOM have a duty to inform the people that they are entitled to between 10 and 100,000 pounds from the British government.
Thank you.
Currently Gibson again. How does government go forward and determine the direction of the country? Normally when you elect a representative, we will think that they are representing our interests, but sometimes it's not so. I would like to make a suggestion. I don't know if it would go into the Constitution or not, but it will work like this. Everyone will have the right to have a phone, a smartphone. There'll be a program set up by the government, like WhatsApp, and you get a vote on issues. Whenever there's a major issue, you have multiple choice questions, and you vote on the direction you want the country to go on this issue. That will go into a statistical level, and so you can see how much are for and who is voting, and then based on what the people want, the government will make will steer the country in that direction, because then it will be the people that want this thing versus an individual that want to steer the country where that individual or that government or that would like to go. So in the case where you think that the elections was there was, let me say, unfairness in an election, then because of the system that you can choose where you want to go in this multiple choice thing, and it will be there as soon as you make the choice, you'll be able to see a graph come up about 100,000 people want the country going in a direction. Then it will be the prime minister or the government, the ruling party, to carry out the will of the people according to the statistics or the feedback from that program. And everybody get one vote. Thank you.
That we are engaging with, and you'll see a similar exercise being conducted there.
Yeah, I wrote down the number, I hope I got it right. So, if you could repeat it again.
Sure.
I found that interesting. Maybe 2 seconds.
832.
Good night. My name is Ian Bradford. I have two quick recommendations. One, I think there should be a method of recall on the government. Right now we have a 5-year period and we can't do anything before that 5-year period is over. I feel we should be able to do, what do they call it in America? We get a number of people signing on, and if you get over a certain number, the government has to go to the polls. And secondly, I think elections should be fixed. A date every 5 years a date certain that we have elections. I think this will stop a lot of the problems we have in elections when, like we had that short, what it was, 2 years, 3 years? I think it should be fixed. Thank you.
Good night again. So while they're listening, I had another idea now. My personal belief when it comes to politics is that power absolutely corrupts. So based on this idea, I believe that in the Constitution we should have a case that you cannot serve as Prime Minister for no more than 2 consecutive terms. I say consecutive terms because I don't like the idea of somebody that's able to run the country that they want to do that they never had a thing again. But I believe that a lot of times when politicians have the idea of getting re-elected, they put all their decisions through this filter of re-election, and that can really skew what they do for the country. Instead of doing what's best for the country, they start doing what's best to get themselves re-elected. So I believe by having a provision that you cannot hold like prime minister. I don't mean like normal ministers. I mean like prime minister no more than 2 consecutive terms, because then at least once they're done, they know they can't run again, so they know their decisions should be best for the country. And then after that, if they want to run again, they can. But I just believe that no more than 2 consecutive terms, because my personal belief that when you're trying to get re-elected, you don't do what's best for the country. You simply do what's best for you.
Eight 832-6775. 832-6775. And you can WhatsApp reform to that WhatsApp number, and then a response will come. Reform, R-E-F-O-R-M, reform.
Ladies and gentlemen, are there any other interventions? If you insist, yeah. Could you please come? We have people online who are calling.
This is just a quick question which you don't have to answer now. How does the commission deal with something which is morally right or in the best interest of people but is unpopular and not supported by the majority of people?
Could you give us particulars?
Let's say that everybody does not think that taxation should be done. That we should do away with taxation. That's one example. Another example is where it relates to rights, human rights. All right, but how do you make the decision when you know amongst yourselves that something is right, but the majority of the population thinks it is wrong?
At the end of the day, we will do our best to make recommendations as to what should be in the Constitution. As I said at the outset, everything isn't necessarily a constitutional issue. They may need to have what I call the subsidiary laws amended to flesh them out, to give the rights, to improve how things are done. So we're going to have to make a judgment as to what goes in the Constitution. For example, it may well be that the Constitution provides for the integrity legislation, which has been talked about. On the other hand, something may be put up that says that this require a statute law to be strengthened. So at the end of the day, the report will deal with the Constitution and then the other issues that are ventilated, which the Commission discussing it. After due consideration, we'll make a recommendation as to where we're going. Remember that the Ford report had a number of minority reports. There was one by former Attorney General Morris King on the matter of the appointment of judges. There was one by former Commissioner Melanie Newton on the question of, I think there was an age issue as for the Senate. There were a number of contributions which generated minority reports. I am sure, given the acuity of the commission with which I have the honor to lead, that we will not get unanimity on every subject. And therefore, there may well be minority reports on some issues, because that's what people have an honest belief in, and they will go on the record. We are not going to shoehorn everything into a report for unanimity's sake if there is a different view. For the very issue of transparency which you speak to, each of us have our own integrity to vindicate and uphold, and therefore we will be true to our own principles. So you have the assurance that truth will out in the final submission. I wish to thank you all for a very interesting and stimulating discussion. And the next commission meeting will be on Sunday the 30th at the Alexandra School. It will be a continuation on this night, which is open-ended. And then the one after that will be at the Dighton Griffith School, which will conclude these three open-ended sessions of the town halls. After the one on the 6th of November, we will advise the thematic ones, the venues for them, and the times for them. But the one at the Arlene School on the 30th will start Alexandra, at 5 o'clock. Thank you all for your attention and have a good night. Thank you very much.